All right. Hi, everybody, and thank you for coming to my panel. As I hope you are aware already, this is Dance and Disability, an informational discussion on how to navigate for the fursuit and furry dance world as a disabled performer. I will talk about strategies for setting goals and managing disability, as well as maintaining a positive attitude and a healthy relationship with dance to prevent burnout, injury, and other frustrations. I will be reading from this handy script to stay on topic and on time, and I do also have some time set aside at the end for questions. Although, that said, if while I'm speaking you do come up with a question you would like to ask, please raise your hand, and I will call on you when I'm at a good time to pause. If your question does involve a subject that I plan to bring up in depth later, I may defer it for a bit, so keep that in mind. I'm not trying to ignore anybody. For a brief self-introduction, so that you know who I am and why I'm giving this panel. I don't think I'm a well-known fursuit dancer by any means, but I do get a surprising number of people hearing my name announced and going, "You're Yu Puffin?" And the answer is yes, I'm Yu Puffin. Hi. I've been dancing for roughly 12 years now, and give or take. I started with idle dances back when Vocaloid was in its heyday. This is also when I started fursuit dancing as well as cosplaying. My first fursuit dance competition was in 2013, which was over 12 years ago now. Wow, 12 years ago? 10 years ago. I can math. And since then, I've done dozens of stage performances, which include tournaments, as well as the anime equivalent of the fursuit dance competition, which is the cosplay lip sync battle. I'm from Seattle, so I usually attend conventions locally. Although this year I got to make this special trip out to the East Coast for Anthro, New England. So thank you guys for having me. I don't have as much formal dance training as some people do, though I have taken classes for styles such as modern contemporary, ballet, and breaking. And I also have a few years of musical theater experience. So that all is my dance experience. The idea for this panel came from the fact that I also have a disability, or possibly more than one, that significantly impacts how I dance because it reduces my lung capacity as well as my motor control. I thought it would be a good idea to give this panel because I haven't noticed a lot of discussion surrounding disability in the fursuit dance world, despite being here for over 10 years. Which isn't to say that it doesn't happen. It's possible that I'm just not in the right circles for it, or not in the right place at the right time, or that it's not a widespread enough topic that I've heard about it previously. In any case, I'm here to present on how being disabled has influenced my experience as a dancer. I hope that other dancers can extrapolate from my story and learn from my experience without having to go through the same things, some of which are not that great, and find ways to make their personal experience with dance more enjoyable, whether you're disabled or not. On that note, I would like to preface this panel with a disclaimer. Basically, everything I'm going to say is based on primarily my personal experience and hence is a reflection of my own opinions. I definitely don't think there's one correct way to be a dancer or to be disabled or even to be a disabled dancer. I don't think my experience is necessarily universal, and you don't necessarily have to agree with what I say. In fact, I encourage you to not take what I say at face value. Take it with a grain of salt and go, does this thing you said resonate with me? Is this thing you said something I can learn from? And you may go, yeah, I agree with this. Or you might go, no, I don't actually agree with this. I think this other thing is more accurate to my experience. As I previously mentioned, my main goal for the attendees of this panel, you guys, thank you for coming, yay, is to come away, for you guys to come away with information that will help you be more satisfied with the place of dance in your life, regardless of whether you're disabled. On that note, in this panel, I'm going to talk a lot about my mentality as a dancer and just a little bit about my disability, not so much about the technical side of dance things. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have extensive formal training in dance, and personally, I believe that I'm an abysmal teacher. So I don't think that I'm qualified to teach dance technique. Plus, people's ability and comfort levels vary widely, as indicated by disability in the subject of this panel. So I think explaining my process of thinking about dance will be more useful on a wider scale, more adaptable to each person's individual experience. Nobody understands your personal individual situation and capabilities better than you do, and no two people are going to have the same experience. So I can speak to technique and things like that with my specific disability, but that may not be applicable in the same way to another person. So for a lot of this panel, I might not be explicitly talking about my disability or even any specific disability, since I'll be more talking about how to navigate dance as a disabled person. But I'm still trying to bring back the connection to disability frequently enough that we don't forget that this is more or less what this panel is really about. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Good, sweet, thank you guys. All right. So for my first section, I have strategies of a disabled dancer for a healthier dancer mentality. I tried to come up with catchy titles for the sections. So to start off, I'm going to outline my thought process as a disabled dancer that helps me consider the place of dance in my life, as well as navigate any environment that involves dance, or even just performance art in general. As I mentioned earlier, I've taken multiple types of dance classes and participated in multiple dance and performance-based communities in my roughly 12 years as a dancer. Obviously, since we are currently at a furry convention, I'm going to try to focus mostly on the furry dance scene, and I might periodically draw from my experiences in other dance communities as well for the sake of reference. I'm going to talk a lot about competitions, given the prevalence of the fursuit dance competition as a main event at furry conventions. However, it's important to remember that competitions are, at the same time, by no means a complete or accurate representation of dance as a hobby or dance as a way of life for those for whom dance surpasses the typical definition of a hobby. Participating in competitions is a primary mode of expression for many of us dancerers, but it doesn't encapsulate everything about this dance as an art. As I discuss my mentality surrounding dance, I'm going to keep these points in mind. And so I have two key vocabulary words for this section, which are sustainability and subjectivity. For the word sustainability, you could reword it for the description avoiding burnout. My hope for everybody who enjoys dance is that they can enjoy it as much as possible for as long as possible. This way, not only can you make the most art, but you get the most possible happiness out of it, which is arguably more important. This is my personal goal in framing my dancer mentality, so it forms the foundation of basically everything I'm going to talk about in this panel. It's all going to circle back to having fun dancing so that you can keep dancing for as long as it continues to be an aspect of your life that brings you fulfillment. Of course, there's also a physical aspect to sustainability, one that's particularly important for disabled dancers, and that is avoiding injury. This can be summarized as a common phrase, listen to your body. I believe that avoiding injury is one of the main factors of what I think is the highly subjective, correct, air quotes, way to dance. As the founders of the Gaga movement style would say, dance towards pleasure and away from pain. And this core principle serves the dual purpose of emphasizing enjoyment of movement as well as staying healthy. We'll get into this more later, but trying your best doesn't mean injuring yourself for the sake of results. Injury can prevent you from dancing at all, which would be a huge bummer in a situation where dancing is something you genuinely enjoy. Since no two people have the exact same disability situation or ability level in general, avoiding injury is going to look slightly different for everyone. And this is why it's so important to pay attention to how you feel when dancing or otherwise exerting yourself. For me, listening to my body means taking plenty of long breaks and not overexerting myself. If I dance too hard for too long without stopping to take a few deep breaths, I might feel okay in the moment, but later I end up with a debilitating migraine that knocks me out for the rest of the day and inhibits my ability to take care of myself and do other activities that I enjoy doing or that I need to do, which means I have to take a lot of precautions when practicing and performing. So, to summarize, sustainability, emotionally and physically, is crucial for a healthy dance mentality. My second term, subjectivity, represents the concept that dance is an art form and hence is inherently subjective. This is why I've emphasized a few times already that what I'm saying is a representation of my own experience and hence may not be 100% applicable to anyone else's. Therefore, there is, by definition, no one objectively correct or good way to dance. This is important to keep in mind because competitions, as a primary format of expression in the dance-a-fur community, almost paradoxically function by defining an ideal representation of dance, which by definition of dance as an art technically doesn't exist. From my experience, the key to maintaining a healthy, sustainable dance mentality, especially as a disabled dancer, is to remember these points. Even as they seem mutually exclusive, they do in fact coexist. You may have heard the phrase, comparison is the thief of joy, and competitions do revolve around comparing dancers to one another to assign them numerical scores, which for an artistic pursuit with so many factors other than what you simply count on your hands or on a sheet of paper, that's inherently reductive. This isn't to say that competitions inherently suck joy from everyone, just that it's important to remember that they're just one small component of your dance experience. And to make your dance experience sustainable, you almost definitely will have to draw enjoyment from other aspects of the dance community in addition to competitions. When you compete as a disabled dancer, you're in a position where you receive a lot of feedback, according to the customs and unwritten rules of the competition format. This continuous influx of feedback can be both a benefit and a challenge. Single most important thing to remember is that all of this feedback is subjective. Regardless of their status as a dancer, other people's opinions about your dance are secondary to you enjoying your dance experience and pursuing it in a way that is fulfilling to you personally. It is unfortunately common for people who have a lot of experience, for example, in terms of how long they've been dancing or how much they've placed in competitions, to believe that they know what's best for other people's dance and to insist that people take their advice. You don't have to listen to them because they're not you, and chances are, unless they are a good and trusted friend, and even if they are, they probably don't know or your work well enough to know what is best for you. This applies to me as well. Remember, even though I've been dancing for roughly half my life at this point, I'm just one dancer. I'm presenting on what has personally benefited me, not to insist that everyone do the same thing, but in hopes that you can use my information to formulate your own individual ideal state of dance. I know that not caring about what other people think is more easily said than done. Indeed, the anxiety behind putting ourselves and our art out there in front of other people is one of the major hurdles a lot of people face that keep them from actually dancing. This is one major aspect of stage fright, something that basically every performer will be familiar with sooner or later. And to many audience members' surprise, even I still get stage fright after performing for as long as I have. And I'm sure most of us have been gone through life continuously being told we shouldn't care too much about what other people think. And for me personally, during a lot of my life, I simply had no idea how to go about not caring. I think some of it comes with like emotional maturity and age. I definitely have an easier time with it now when I'm 26 years old than I did even just a few short years ago. In my opinion, it's easiest to do if, as a dancer, you continuously reflect on how you currently feel about dance and its place in your life, what you want out of it, and how you can engage with dance to bring you the most possible enjoyment. This is a constant process, and finding out what you want out of dance, so to speak, can take years, like 10 years or more. Plus, your ideal state of dance will probably not be a fixed concept that you decide on once and then stop thinking about forever. It can change over time. But that's why having fun with dance and preventing burnout is so important, so that you can keep dancing for those 10 years or more it takes you to discover what you enjoy most about dance. Again, back to the concept of sustainability. And when you consider what you want out of dance, given the prominence of dance competitions, you will likely consider placing in competitions and receiving praise, as these are things you want. This can be healthy in moderation. However, these aspects are primarily influenced by other people and hence are essentially outside of your control. So focusing too much on these will lead to frustration with dance in the long term, as psychologically you'll never quite be able to get as much of them as you truly want. And this is basically just a way of reframing my point about not caring too much about what other people think. When considering what you want out of dance and setting goals accordingly, it is important to set goals that are centered around aspects of your dance experience that you can control. For example, it may be tempting to set a goal like place first in a competition. However, competition placements are ultimately up to judges and other aspects over which you have very little, if any, control. That said, you can reframe goals such as these to focus on skills that you can personally develop and other aspects that you can control. For example, you could set a goal like build a skill set in insert dance style or movement concept here, for example, modern dance, that will primarily function to help you feel fulfilled, but may have the residual additional effect of possibly making your dancing more appealing to judges. Side effect. Goals can be simple or complex, long-term or short-term. Maybe you just want to figure out how to do a single move or step, or maybe you want to take a deep dive and learn how to do an entire style. Whatever makes you feel engaged and fulfilled with dance. So yeah, that's my takeaway for this section. Figure out what you want out of dance and pursue that. As a dancer furry, you will be fielding a lot of feedback from other people, so it will almost certainly be difficult to tune out the metaphorical noise and focus on what is appealing and fulfilling to you. However, when you keep in mind that your situation and ability level are unique, nobody else can truly know for certain what is best for you. Critically consider all feedback and prioritize yourself so that you can get as much enjoyment out of dance for as long as possible. All right, that was strategies of a disabled dancer fur. Now that we have those strategies introduced, I'm going to elaborate on how to put them into practice with an evaluation of the dancer fur environment. So we're at this point in the panel. You may be wondering, hey you, why are you spending so much time talking about letting people dance how they want? And what does not caring what other people think have to do with disability? My answer to that question has two parts. First, from my experience, the furry dance environment is especially challenging compared to other performance-focused environments because, from my experience, there is, by convention, more of a propensity for judges and other dancers to provide all sorts of feedback, especially in the form of pointing out perceived areas for potential improvements, in air quotes, because good is subjective, in the furry dance environment than there is in any other dance or performance environment I participated in, including classes. Every dance teacher I've ever studied under has been more forgiving of perceived flaws and more supportive of the process of discovering and highlighting a student's individual strengths than the furry dance community as a whole has ever been in my experience. So it's especially important to keep the sustainability and subjectivity aspects of my mentality that I mentioned in mind as a dancer fur, simply because there's so much pressure to prioritize other people's opinions over your own enjoyment and health. And the ultimate effect of this widespread tendency is to be hypercritical of dance, one's own dance as well as that of others. And it's to prioritize improvement, again, in air quotes, because good is subjective, over other aspects of the dance experience, such as maintaining a fulfilling relationship with dance. For the disabled community, our disabilities very much affect how we dance. We have to be very careful to prioritize our health, to avoid injury, and often we are simply physically incapable of doing the same things as able-bodied dancers. So effectively, our disabilities are inseparable from the rest of our dance experience. Hence the mentality of I'm over-prioritizing improvement, and the pressure in the dancer fur environment to adopt this mentality is disproportionately detrimental to disabled performers. If I said dancers, that could have been an alliteration. It may not make a difference to a lot of able-bodied dancers necessarily, but for us disabled performers, prioritizing making our dance look good to satisfy other people, including judges, can cost us our health and can cause significant injury that could very easily prevent us from continuing to dance in the future. And this is why I spend so much time emphasizing to dance for yourself first. As many disabled people can attest, nobody can ever fully, truly understand your situation from an outside perspective. The person with the most complete and accurate understanding of your own dance experience and your own disability is you. We can share knowledge and tips on how to dance, as well as how to manage disability similar to ours based on our own experience, with the caveat that no one else will have the exact same situation. So said tips and solutions may not work for everyone, and in some cases may make someone else's situation worse, whatever that means for them, even if they do seem to have a similar dance experience or a similar disability. And I'm hoping that by pointing out these common threads of reasoning, that I've elucidated the connection between dance, really art in general, and disability, aside from how, as I've said, our disabilities affect us physically and mentally, and hence strongly influence how we create art. Because of this connection, I've noticed that furry dance competitions have a disproportionately strong effect on my personal mentality surrounding my dance, as well as that surrounding my disability. In furry dance competitions, judges will typically provide feedback to the dancer, including at least one aspect of something they appreciated, and one aspect that they believe can be improved. And as part of the show, they've publicly announced this feedback. And this is what I would say is an unwritten rule, so to speak. Technically, there's no reason dance competitions have to do this. And indeed, a lot of non-furry competitions I've been in, commentary by the MC and or judges is primarily for entertainment purposes, interestingly enough. and technical feedback is offered privately after the competition on an opt-in basis, as notes either provided verbally or written on a sheet of paper. So interesting difference there. From my personal experience, this has been the most considerate and productive way to give and receive feedback. If the dancer doesn't want feedback, they don't have to get it, and then if nobody else wants to know what the judge said, they don't have to. I will talk about this more later, but to clarify before I go further, I'm not drawing this connection to claim that we need to change how dance competitions operate, but instead to draw awareness to the aforementioned pressure to be hypercritical of your own work, in hopes that this pressure will thereby be easier to resist, and you can develop a mentality surrounding dance that is more beneficial to you personally. Because of the connection between dance and disability, you can think of critiquing someone's dance as a similar pursuit to offering someone advice on how to manage their disability. When you give advice on someone's dance, you're interpreting it based on your own experience as a dancer and/or spectator. Generally, you decide on something to suggest that the dancer improve by considering what you would personally improve if this was your own performance to work on. You're effectively making an educated guess about their situation and making a suggestion accordingly. That said, the performer almost definitely has a different experience and a different perspective from you. They may not even be physically capable of making the improvement you're suggesting. I certainly think there are appropriate times and places for criticism, but I also think there are a lot of times when telling someone what you think they should improve can do more harm than good. Fostering an environment where someone constantly has to be prepared to feel criticism instills a sense of hypervigilance that causes frustration and burnout for a lot of people. And so here's the thing I've said on Twitter for some context. Before you get too critical about my dancing, just remember, I have a respiratory condition, I have a circulatory condition, and I have a mobility condition, plus my dancing space at home is only big enough to turn around in, it's like this wide, and I have downstairs neighbors because I'm in a second floor apartment. I'm doing my best with what I have, and I do honestly think that every dancer out there is doing their best with what they have at any given time. I've heard a phrase somewhere on the internet that's like, you are doing your best because if you could be doing better, you would. And when you are always trained to be looking for things to improve, it's easy to forget that completing a piece, an art piece, or a stage performance is a major accomplishment in itself. And personally, for me, it's very damaging to my mental health to rewatch a video of my performance and have the first feeling I experience be disappointment, because I can see all the points where I didn't hit an angle quite right, or I wasn't quite on beat, and in reality, everyone other than you will almost certainly be seeing your performance for the first time, with few or no expectations. And unlike you, they will not be nearly as inclined to see as many of the flaws, in air quotes, in your dance, and are more likely to remember all the moments that stood out to them as something that made them think, wow, that was really cool. That's how it works for me anyway. So I learned this sense of hypervigilance I mentioned primarily from my furry dance experience. And unlearning it has been one of the most prominent challenges in considering what I personally want from dance. It has kept me mentally pointing out all the perceived flaws in my work before I can acknowledge my individual strengths. And this focus on improvement above all else, by definition, reduces the priority of enjoyment that I think is so important to maintaining a healthy relationship with dance. Likewise, while unlearning hypervigilance has been such a challenge, it has also been one of the most rewarding and fulfilling improvements to my dance mentality personally. And this may not be true for everybody, but I think it would improve the accessibility and sustainability of the furry dance environment in general. I did not finish that sentence. For everyone to be aware of hypervigilance. The widespread prioritization of improvement above all else in the furry dance community can also unfortunately tend to manifest as ableism. There is a strong overlap between ableism and elitism. If there was a Venn diagram, I can't say for certain that would be like a circle, but it would be pretty close. There would be a lot of overlap there. In an environment where people strongly value being able to not only find perceived flaws in your work, but also to improve those flaws, disabled dancers tend to be treated as less valuable because they can have less control over what other people tend to perceive as a weakness than do able-bodied dancers. As I mentioned, our disabilities are an inseparable part of our dance experience that can prevent us from doing the same things as able-bodied dancers. But that does not mean that we are worse dancers or that our work or experience are less valuable or less worthy of a position in the dance community. Here's a quote I found appropriately timed on Tumblr from the user Fully Articulated Gold Skeleton, for the sake of crediting who said it. Instead of telling disabled kids, you can do anything if you put your mind to it, I think we should tell them, the things you are capable of doing matter. A person can't live on an increasingly strained hope that someday they'll be good enough, especially if all you ever tell them is who they are and what they are do now is worthless. Okay, reiterating that. The things you are capable of doing matter. This mentality benefits able-bodied dancers as well, because everyone has to start from somewhere, and it's much easier to engage with dance in an enjoyable way if you do not have to struggle with the discouraging notion that your work is worthless until you make it to a certain point. This can go for other forms of privilege too, that is, lack of experience with systemic barriers, such as having free time, spare energy, or disposable income to attend community events, dance classes, or to practice frequently. On top of the typical anxiety associated with presenting one's art and fielding criticism, I've spoken to many furry dancers who have unfortunately left the community because this elitism was so damaging to their mental health. And since elitism can commonly manifest as ableism, it is, by definition, disproportionately affecting disabled dancers. One thing I think is important to remember with dance is that many dance styles represented, especially in the furry dance scene today, were originally established in a sense of community and belonging, marginalized groups establishing dance styles almost as a form of protest to say, hi, we're here, we're never going away. We have a group where we support each other, and this is how we express ourselves. And so I believe that in order to respect the origin of dance styles many of us specialize in, we should maintain that community aspect and extend it to our fellow dancers by recognizing and valuing each individual artist's contribution to dance as an art form in order to be less elitist and less ableist. Judging someone or excluding someone from a community based on their perceived ability level is antithetical to the importance of community in dance. It effectively makes that community into a clique or something you have to be qualified to participate in. And personally, I believe that elitism is inherently disrespectful to the origins of dance as an art form for this reason. Okay, that's it for that section. Great. Well, I pause. Does anyone have any quick questions before I move on? Everything making sense? Cool? Cool, all right. The functionality of competitions. Like I said, I'll be talking a lot about fursuit dance competitions. So now I've lined up my struggles with dance competitions, and now I have ideas for solutions and ways to deal with it. The solution to what I believe is an elitism/ableism issue in the furry dance environment is not to overhaul the fursuit dance competition or to stop judging people entirely. The competition aspect is the main draw for the audience. It adds the anticipation of wondering who will place as an incentive to attend the event. From my experience historically, performance-based events without a competition aspect generally see fewer attendees than those with a competition aspect. And the fewer people spectate, the fewer people get to appreciate the community's artists. Another thing to remember about competitions is that they are inherently equal, not fair. Some of you may have heard the phrase, treating people fairly often means treating them differently. And this is antithetical to the competition format, since by definition, each competitor is judged under the same rubric. They are judged equally, not fairly. Hence, competitions are not designed to be fair, but to reward the participant with the greatest advantage. As a result, I believe that there is, by definition, no way to make competition truly fair, but by extension, there's no way to completely remove ableism and/or elitism from competitions. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to format a competition so that's more fair. I think that can be a really rewarding experience. I also believe that this delivers diminishing returns. And competitions can't occur without judges. I do still think judges should try to judge respectfully, but they do by definition have to judge. They should still get the opportunity to provide feedback and assign performance scores if they feel this is important. And this is where the private opt-in format for feedback I mentioned earlier comes in. It gives the performer agency and integrity to address whether they personally are in a situation where receiving feedback will be helpful rather than damaging to their mentality, without limiting the judge's capacity to do their job. So rather than proposing that we overhaul the competition format, I'm explaining these trends in hopes that it will bring increased awareness of the general tendency to search for weaknesses in a performance and prioritizing improving flaws over, for example, celebrating strengths, and how this tendency can be particularly harmful and discouraging to disabled performers. Again, the primary purpose of this awareness is not necessarily to change anything about the environment itself. Personally, I think that would be nice. It would be great if ableism didn't exist. That is a big task. Instead, to consider it as a factor in how you can navigate dance and making dance and performance personally fulfilling to you, is to keep all of this in mind. If possible, I would like to do away with the widespread rhetoric, even from the most well-meaning people, that improvement of a skill is directly correlated to effort. That is, that trying harder will necessarily lead to continuous improvement of said skill. Here's the thing. Progress is not linear. You may have heard healing is not linear. Progress is very similar. Expecting each and every performance to be better than the last is just plain unrealistic. And proposing increased effort or just trying harder as a generalized key to improvement disregards the existence of the systemic barriers I mentioned earlier: physical capability, disposable income, free time, and so on. Far more often than I would like, I have observed as a general trend, dancers and judges claim that a fellow dancer's performance is not good, or that the dancer doesn't try. When given these systemic barriers and what I've said about individual experiences with art and disability, they don't really have a way of truly knowing that for sure. They can't tell just by looking at somebody if they're trying or not. I don't think so anyway. Going back to the origin of dance as an establishment of community, I think it's also important to recognize the primary role of competitions and similar events to bring dancers together and strengthen that sense of community and belonging. And if a culture of constantly critiquing others' dances and or placing more value on the contributions of dancers with higher perceived ability levels is so widespread that it makes a significant number of artists feel unwelcome to the point of ceasing their participation in that community. Personally, I believe that community has failed them. If a dance community is founded on selectivity or is based on who has, in air quotes, potential, or who is the most resilient to unsolicited criticism, then by definition, it's not inclusive. It's not really a community at all. Okay, so that's just about everything I have to say regarding what I consider a sustainable dancer for mentality. That said, obviously, I don't expect anyone to walk out of this panel and instantly know how exactly they want dance to fit into their life and what they're going to do dance-wise in the next 10 minutes. Although if anyone does, then great. As I mentioned, it's an ongoing process that you'll probably be involved in for as long as you continue to pursue dance. But keep in mind, nobody can be perfect all the time. Your best is going to look different every day. Please remember to be kind with yourself, treat yourself with grace and patience so that you can continue to enjoy dance for as long as possible. So here, to transition into the next section, here's a quote I found saved on my phone. I think from somewhere on Tumblr, but I unfortunately have no clue what to cite as the original source. But anyway, here it is. Getting thicker skin is great in theory, but I think for some people, getting better at handling your thin skin is going to be way more helpful advice. I have strong emotional reactions to criticism, and they might never go away. But I can continue to try and handle each situation maturely, and that's the important part. Sometimes irrational feelings are chronic, and living with them is better than try to beat yourself up into not having them. So with that, the next section is improving your dance without critique. And for the sake of this section, improving will mean whatever you personally think will make your dance better, will make you feel better about your dance, will make you see your dance and think, wow, I love this. This makes me feel good. Again, subjectivity. It's different for everybody. With this section, I hope to elucidate how I decide what I want out of my dance experience, which I hope will likewise help you decide what goals to set. Of course, it's practically impossible to create a world completely without unwelcome comments. Graciously taking criticism, regardless of whether you agree with it, is a skill that can be learned, albeit one that takes time. And facing a situation that's too challenging for your skill level can result in burnout, which we don't want. Obviously, I would love if everyone in the dance community could recognize that the line between constructive critique and harmful or unwelcome comment is A, very thin and blurry, and B, in a different place for everyone. Because as I said, everyone's experience with dance, especially once you factor in varying physical capabilities, is going to change where that line is. I don't think it's realistic to make everyone agree with me on this point, which is why I've emphasized in this panel that dance as an art form, again, is highly subjective. Someone else having a fulfilling, sustainable dance experience may mean that they disagree with me on several key points. I think that's okay. If that makes their personal dance experience worse, then I don't want them to agree with me. I believe that in order for the fursuit dance community to truly function as a community and not as a clique or a meritocracy, we have to recognize that every performer's unique individual perspective brings value to the dance environment that is not determined by their physical capabilities, and especially not by whether they place in a competition. To reiterate, I think critique can be helpful in specific situations. It's not a useless concept by any stretch of the imagination. That said, I think there is a general misconception that if someone who has more experience doesn't help a dancer find the flaws in their work, that dancer will never improve. On the contrary, once you think about it, an artist's work is rarely static. On an individual level, over time, developing a skill does generally result in improvement. I've worded it this way because, again, there is a deeply ableist misconception that if you directly compare two people and one person is more skilled, it's because they tried harder or put more effort into developing that skill. Please don't do this. Directly comparing artists like this is really disrespectful. So yeah, if you don't feel ready to field any and all comments that could potentially be thrown at you, don't worry. As a disabled dancer, it can be difficult and frustrating when someone tells you to improve your dance by doing something you're not actually physically capable of doing. Focusing on self-improvement without worrying about what others think can be not only, as I described at length, healthy, but it can also bring different perspectives and dimensions into your dance that you might not get the chance to address otherwise. Think about it. There's that saying, almost everybody is already their own worst critic. People have a natural tendency to notice even minor perceived flaws in their work, and as they come back to repeatedly work on a given project, those flaws will become more and more obvious to them. Chances are, if you can simply watch your own dancing on a video recording or in a mirror, you will know this very well. Indeed, in my personal experience, the vast majority of things dance competition judges have pointed out to me as far as perceived improvements go are things that I, already noticed as I was in the process of dancing. I'm dancing and I go, oh, my foot wasn't quite in the right place, or something like that. Or B, notice when I went back and watched the video of my dance, I go, oh, that angle could have been a little bit better. Oh, that didn't look quite how I wanted. And this is a big part of why so many people find it difficult or embarrassing to watch videos of themselves. I think a lot of us will have this feeling where we're nervous and we go back and we're like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch that video. I'm going to see all the things that are wrong with it. Yeah, I see some nodding heads in the audience. You all feel this, right? We're all our own worst critic. And this is, I think, I think when people get too overcritical of others and condescend them for not taking critique or for not meeting a standard, aside from being borderline or sometimes blatantly ableist, it discredits the inherent difficulty of dancing at all. Dancing is hard. If you can dance, I respect you. And I say that as a person who can dance. But also dancing is really cool. Okay. I mentioned the word critique a lot in this panel. I actually want to address an important aspect of the word critique. I think might be a common misconception that the word critique only consists of telling someone what you think they can improve about their work when they say, oh, I'm going to give you some critique. And that giving a genuine compliment is less helpful, and hence does not fall under the definition of constructive criticism. On the contrary, I've noticed significant periods of improvement in my dance, or otherwise that my time spent dancing is more productive or feels more satisfying to me when I've chosen to focus on my strengths, rather than attempting to rectify, the word is rectify, something that I'm naturally not as strong in. In the past couple of years, I noticed that a recurring comment I received on my dance is that it made me cry. It made people in the audience cry. So I thought about it, interesting. That's a trend that I never would have thought about. So now when I'm working on a performance, oftentimes I take time to consider how I can lean into the emotional appeal of my dance. And according to the comments I'm continuing to receive, and as well as how satisfied I am with my own dance, it seems to be working. I'm still getting people say, oh, that made me cry. I think, the lip sync battle at KimuraCon, Uptown was like, oh, if I still had emotions, I would have cried. It was very satisfying. The performance where I focused on dancing how I wanted, rather than based on what judges told me to do in the past, or done what I thought was satisfying the judges, received overwhelmingly more positive feedback, if we're talking about feedback from other people generally. And this holds true for two of the major performances I gave last year in 2023. At the cosplay lip sync battle at KuroNekoCon in July, again, roughly the anime convention equivalent of the fursuit dance competition in that people get up on stage and do dance-adjacent performances in costume, and at the fursuit dance competition at Furvana back in September. Both of these performances I did last year, I did based on what I personally thought I would want to see myself do, and in both cases, almost counterintuitively, I had like judges or people who are familiar with my work tell me that they thought they were the best performances they'd ever seen. So that was pretty cool. Performance they've seen from me, I should specify. So what I'm trying to say is, with this whole section, even that supposing you decide that improving your dancing is important to you, if you don't want to listen to comments or from judges or from other dancers, you don't have to. Your dancing is still gonna improve if you keep at it. Whenever I take dance classes, a recurring theme brought up by the instructors, regardless of who they are, where, when I took this class, is to dance in a way that feels fulfilling and satisfying to you personally. The skill aspect will come naturally after that. In a dance class I just took, the instructor said to dance in a way that feels delicious. They use a Spanish word for delicious. I don't speak Spanish, so I can't pronounce it correctly, but I loved that description, like, it'll make your body feel good, like you just ate something really yummy. And then you'll be happy when you dance. And I love that. Conversely, I've noticed some diminishing returns when I get too caught up in trying to improve something that my body doesn't naturally want to do. As I mentioned earlier, dance towards pleasure and away from pain. I've also spent several years trying to clean up my dance moves, since that's a critique I receive frequently, but spending so much time and effort addressing a perceived flaw in my dance takes away from my dance experience as a whole. Hence, it actually makes my performances worse. Again, according to how I personally feel about them and how other people have commented on them. Compared to focusing on something about my dance that makes me feel fulfilled and happy instead, something that's delicious. When I prioritize what I find fulfilling in my own dance, I can likewise set corresponding goals, like study contemporary dance for an hour, or focus on making my next choreography more emotive than the last one. Again, goals can be simple, complex, something that I'm in control in, long-term, short-term, something that'll bring me satisfaction. And when you consider all these factors, you can see why it's important to genuinely enjoy dance as a pastime rather than doing it solely for the sake of constantly improving. Because then that's how you make dance sustainable to you as a hobby or a way of life. All right, checking on the time here. I have a section I might come back to if we have time. I want to get to questions in just a second. Before I do open up the panel to questions, I did receive one question in advance that someone wanted me to address. And so here's the question. It was, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? So just in case anyone's not familiar with this term, imposter syndrome is when you persistently believe that your accomplishments or external validation are fraudulent or deceptive, or that you're not as capable or skilled as everyone around you believes you are. Basically, you're worried that you're unintentionally masquerading as a skilled person, or that you're an imposter, or that you're somehow tricking people into thinking you're a really good dancer. And if anyone does ever feel this way, you're not alone. It's a common struggle, and yet it's one that is very difficult to overcome. I've definitely been in situations where I can't shake the feeling that like my achievements or my placements in competitions are undeserved. I'm like, I think there could have been so many other people who could have gotten that placement. When it comes to my personal solutions for imposter syndrome, I primarily return to two of the concepts I mentioned earlier. One, the one about learning to live with irrational feelings rather than beating yourself out of them or beating them out of yourself. Two, the one about competitions not being complete representations of any dance experience. I think a major factor of imposter syndrome is mentally elevating people who have, for example, placed in a lot of competitions above your own level, putting them on a pedestal, so to speak. Social media as an experience can contribute to this illusion of perfection especially well, As helpful as it is in connecting people, this can also exacerbate imposter syndrome. If you find yourself struggling to believe that you actually deserve your accomplishments, I would encourage you to recognize that every artist has value as an individual, including you. No one is any more or less worthy of being a dancer. No one inherently deserves to accomplish things more or less than any other person. That goes for other people, yeah, but it also goes for you. It's true that placements and achievements and such are things that you should celebrate. It's also true that placements and achievements are a result of factors outside of your control, like I said, like judges' opinions. And when you factor in the idea that no dancer is more valuable or worthy than any other, you can recognize that judges are indeed just people with opinions. Their opinions are informed by their skill and experience, but they are still opinions, not facts. I believe a key to dealing with imposter syndrome is to put a healthy degree of mental separation between your personal identity and your achievements, and celebrate yourself as a dancer and a member of a community first and foremost. In other words, try not to take your own dancing too seriously. You'll have your high moments where you go, yeah, this is great, I can do this forever. You'll have your low moments, you're going, oh, I'm struggling, I'm so tired, this kind of sucks. And you'll accomplish things that you feel good about and that other people feel good about. And sometimes you'll also mess up and you might feel like beating yourself up about it. But when you achieve something you feel good about, it's important to celebrate it. Also, try not to assign so much value to it that you think a given achievement is enough to elevate somebody over others. It's a bit of a difficult balance, but I think there's a balance there. One of my favorite quotes goes roughly you can be a really cool person, you're a really cool person, but even if you're the coolest person ever, you're never cool enough to look down on anybody. Everyone here in the community is equals, we're all fellow artists, we can learn and be inspired by other people. And I don't think that any one person has any more value than any other. So yeah, that is what I have to say to that question. Last note before I open up to questions. Since we're talking about disability, I think main stages at FurryCon should have wheelchair ramps. That's what the sentence says here. I don't remember the last time I saw a wheelchair accessible ramp at a furry convention main stage.
Especially at raves.
At raves, yeah, I don't go to the raves a whole lot, but I notice when I go to anime conventions, thankfully anime conventions is becoming more common to have wheelchair accessible ramps, but it's really cool. I'm struggling to remember last time I went to a furry competition, oh, did they have a wheelchair ramp going up to that stage? I don't remember. So yeah, I think that should be a thing that's considered more, because I know there's wheelchair users in the fandom, there's wheelchair users at the conventions, and making that space accessible to them would be super awesome. All right, yes, perfect timing. I was just about to open it for questions. Did you have a question?
One thing I think that has, because I am a furry raver, but I'm also an early bird,
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of trouble staying up late.
Oh yeah, I feel that.
Especially if it's icy cold and dark.
Oh yeah.
I'm a Boston native, so
Mm.
I know how the city is. The thing is that I know some hardcore ravers would probably think this is terrible, but there's ableism in the rave community, both furry and non-furry, so I would think that there should be some raves that are earlier in the evening.
Yeah, I would love that. So this was in case anyone didn't hear it, this was a comment on how raves can be more accessible by being earlier in the evening, or for people who have a hard time staying up late when it's icy, dark, and cold. Yeah, I'm also an early bird, so I feel this. I would love if there were a venue allowing for this, because having space and enough rooms for it can be kind of a struggle. Having an earlier rave and a later rave would be awesome. I've been to some conventions where the rave starts at 7 p.m. and I usually go to bed at 7, so if I'm I just need to stay up a little bit late to go to the rave, that would be awesome. Yeah, so that would be one thing to consider. The one thing about accessibility is no space can be inherently accessible to anyone, right? So people on different schedules, some people like to stay up later, some people like to get up earlier, which is why I think it's important to have a variety of spaces whenever the venue allows for it, whenever organization allows for it, to have something that can accommodate everybody. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, you're right in the front.
Do you specialize in a particular type of dance?
Yes, that's a good question. So the question, in case anyone didn't hear, was whether I specialize in any particular kind of dance. I think modern contemporary is probably my specialty, just because I have the most formal training in it. I studied it for 3 or 4 years in college, and that's the most in-depth study I've done for any style. So yeah, that's what I would say is mine. Yeah, questions can be about anything I mentioned in this panel, anything about me personally. I saw you in the back, your hand went up first.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Thanks. I was so excited.
Yay.
I started trying to dance ballet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that stems from like my love of classical music.
Uh-huh.
But like as my disability became more prominent, it was pretty clear that that wasn't going to be an accessible dance for
Mm-hmm.
me. So I'm wondering if you've had any experience like that, like you start doing something and like the way that the dance is formatted isn't really working for your body.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the question was like, for example, if your disability keeps you from doing a style you're really into, like ballet, if there's something you can do to address that situation. Oh yes, I've run into this situation so much. Like I said, my disability affects my stamina. A lot of breaking is not actually physically, I'm not actually physically capable of it. Even breaking is usually done in short sprints, but like when I take breaking lessons, when I do breaking, it's too fast for me to keep up with, and I end up pretty sick from this. And there's also some dance styles that involve like really hard popping, or I struggle with locking personally. It takes a lot of lung capacity and energy for me to perform the moves. And in situations like this, I would recommend finding something that you like about the dance that you can apply to your experience, where it's like you can still do it, but it might still be reminiscent of that style. Like maybe for ballet, like maybe you can't, there's like a specific foot position. I studied a semester of ballet, so I only know a little bit about it. But like maybe there's a specific position with your hands or arms or feet that you can't do, or a specific jump that you can do. But maybe you can find little ballet moves or ballet inspired moves that you can do, and you can weave them into your dance style with inspiration from other places, so you still have like that ballet influence, even if you're not doing like straight out 100% ballet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sweet. Awesome. All right. Other questions? Everest? I believe I saw your hand.
Hi.
Hello, Everest.
So I guess it's kind of a similar type of question.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I'm a dancer with aphantasia.
Okay.
Aphantasia is this type of brain disorder where you can't really mentally picture things.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard of that.
It really heavily affects learning choreography.
Mm-hmm.
I really struggle with that.
Uh-huh.
So I guess in a similar light, my question is like, how do you not get frustrated towards your disability?
Oh, that's a very good question. Thank you, Everest.
Dance in general, I guess.
Yeah, so the question was how to not be frustrated with your disability when it's a really big roadblock. I don't know if I have an easy answer to that question. As I said, as I'm sure we're all aware, disability really affects how we can dance and what things we can and can't do. I think it would go back to focusing on the things that you can do that you're proud of, and the things that make you happy. With things like learning choreography, sometimes let's see. I don't know if I can speak to the aphantasia thing specifically because I'm not sure I've experienced in that area, but like trying like a different strategy or a different area of dance that might be like a workaround, or thinking about things in like a process that's not like the expected way that someone would think about it, but might still get you to that same endpoint. Like if you and still I can. Maybe I don't want to talk too much about aphantasia because I don't have experience with it. I don't want to recommend anything that doesn't necessarily help. But like, if you can't visualize it, maybe think about like feeling it or using some other sense yeah. That's about all. Did that answer your question at all? A little bit? Yeah. Sorry. I know.
My dancing is freestyle, and so everything I've learned over time is muscle memory.
Muscle memory,
Same
yeah.
with drawing.
Uh-huh.
It's more so just like, I don't know, I get so frustrated and burnt out because it feels like I'm not improving.
Uh-huh.
That's like the biggest thing I have mental.
Oh yeah, I feel that. You can go through times when it'll feel like you're not improving. I'll basically guarantee you, even like, I don't know if this helps at all, but even if it doesn't feel like you're improving, you're improving. I don't know if anyone has seen like the graphic that sometimes popped up on my social media or internet or whatever, where it's like I think it's usually a concept used for drawing, where it's like how good your eyes are and how good your hands are, and they're like in the squiggly lines that continue to overlap, where like one will improve faster than the other. So like, for example, if your ability to see things is really good, but your hands are not as good, you'll be like, oh, my art looks like it sucks because I can see all the places where I made mistakes, and then your drawing will improve more, and then your hands won't be, and your seeing won't be as good. It's like, oh, I'm drawing all this stuff that's above my skill level. It looks great, and I have no idea how I'm doing it. So there's a fluctuation that I think it applies to dance too, where your ability to see what you're doing with your dance will sometimes improve faster than how you're actually dancing, and it'll feel really difficult. So yeah, for me, just being aware of that and being like it doesn't feel like you're improving, but like you're already, like, even if you dance today, you're already one day better than you were yesterday. So yeah. All right, I think I have a question over here. Yeah? Yes, you.
So as someone who's running an introductory dance panel later this con, do you
Awesome.
have any advice on being more cognizant of disabilities in general?
Oh, that's a good question. So the question was advice on being cognizant of disabilities as a person running a instructed dance panel. I think just as a general trend, I think the just awareness in general of like some people may not do the dance move the same way, or they may not be able to like if it's something that with like hands or feet, they may not be able to incorporate their body the same way. Just keeping in mind that everyone's trying their best, and they might have to come up with different ways to do the same move, or like if, for example, their legs are not more mobile and they can't do the footwork as much, they can focus more on their hands. Honestly, just like awareness in general and not withholding judgment. Like if it looks like someone's not trying, they're almost definitely they are trying. And that's really the whole reason I have this panel, is for the awareness. Does that answer your question? Awesome, thank you. Any other questions? I think we're running a little short on time. I don't have a clock in front of me. Yes, in front with the lesbian colored person.
Yeah, mostly I was wondering because I used to dance and I had several problems that made that harder, so I kind of fell out. My main problem right now is I can't really bend my back, and there'd be good stuff to start working on that I could be able to get back into dance. I don't think no competition, I just want to dance.
So let me make sure, I'm gonna rephrase that question to make sure I understand it. Like how to get back into dance if you have a limitation that makes it difficult for you?
Yeah. Or like styles that would help with like limited muscle.
Styles that would help with limited movement. I might give like a catch-all general answer to this question. Again, so I don't like speak specifically to a disability I don't have experience with, but like getting inspiration from a lot of different kinds of dance. This is a little bit of a tangent. For me, I get a lot of inspiration from watching a variety of other people dancing and looking up other different styles. And like, if like someone's doing something in a way they're like, oh, that looks cool, like you can adapt it to your own physical experience. You don't have to do it exactly like how they're doing it. You're like, oh, I can't bend my back as far as they can, but I can do the thing with the arms. I can use like a concept that I thought was personally touching, or like an emotion that I can dance from, that still resonates with me, even if I don't incorporate my body in the same way. That's probably what I recommend. Did that answer your question? Anything like more specific that you had questions about?
I mean, if I do, I can figure that out.
All right, yeah, sure
Don't
thing.
waste time.
Yeah, I think we might be running close on time. Yeah, 57. So I have time for like one or two more questions if anyone has any.
Sorry, 59.
59. All right. So yeah, we probably should get out of here so the next person can prepare. But thank you all for coming again. I hope this was informative and that you can take like, even if you can just take one little thing out of it that will help you in your dance journey, that will make me very happy. If you have any other questions or comments for me afterwards, I don't check my Telegram as much, but I do have a Telegram. I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram under the name Yu Puffin. It's spelled Y-U and then Puffin like the bird. But yeah,